Hello everybody and welcome to another video in this Django and React tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be continuing from where we left off. We're going to be using the Spotify API. We're going to be getting access, or I guess the information about the currently playing song and displaying that on the screen. Now, depending on how quickly that goes, we may also be playing and pausing the current song. I'll show you how to do that. And then in future videos, we'll talk about fast forwarding the song and some other random things as well. So anyways, that's what we have in store for today. So let's go ahead and get started. Although I will just let you guys know right now that this is where the cool stuff, in my opinion, kind of starts to happen. This app at this point in time, sure, it's interesting, but there's not really any cool thing that we're doing with it. It doesn't really have any purpose. We just have users in a room. Now, as soon as we finish this part, there will actually be a purpose to this application, and well, you'll start to see why I wanted to do this tutorial series. Anyways, let's dive in. So the first thing that we need to do is we want to be able to get the information about the currently playing song. So I want something like the title of the song, the artist, the duration, the time, the the album cover, if it's playing, if it's paused, the ID of the song. All that information is stuff that I want. So to do that, we're going to have to send a request to the Spotify API to get the current information about the current person, I guess the host of the room's playback information. So the first thing that we're going to do this is we're going to set up a new view, and this view is going to be responsible for returning information about the current song. So we're going to call this current song. So class current song. This is going to be an API view, and we'll just define a get method inside of here that will take self request and then optional format, which is equal to none. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do inside of this method here is I'm going to get the room code. So I'm going to say room code is equal to self.request.session.get, and then we're looking for the room underscore code. And then after that, what I'm going to do is actually get access to this room object so I can figure out who the host is. So the reason I need to do this is because whoever is requesting the information about the current song may not actually be the host, right? They may not be the person who's actually authenticated their Spotify with us. So we just need to look for the information relating to the host of the room. So if someone sends us a request and they're not the host, we need to figure out what room they're in. We need to figure out who the host is, and we need to use that host's information to get the information about the song. So let's say room is equal to, and then we're going to say room, and we might need to import that. So we'll do that in a second, but room.objects.filter, and we're going to filter code is equal to room underscore code. And then we're going to take index 0. We know that this room will exist because if it's in the session, well, it should exist at least. We'll index it at 0, and then that will give us the room. So next we can say the host is equal to room.host. And now that we have the host, we'll be able to actually get the token information relating to this host and then send the request using that token, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is just say endpoint is equal to, and I'm going to define the endpoint that I want to hit to get the currently playing song information. So I'm going to say player/currently-playing. This is the endpoint that we need to use if we want to get access to the song that is currently playing for this user's Spotify account. Now, before I forget, let me go import room from, oh, actually, sorry, we already have room in here. So we're going to say from api.models import room. Not sure if you guys have this in your code or not. Either way, it'll be linked in the description, but yeah, just import this line. Again, we're just referencing the API folder, which has the room model in it. So that's how we do that. All right. So now that we have this here, we actually need to send a request to Spotify. Now, whenever we send a request to Spotify, we need to include our token. So rather than me just sending one request in here and writing all the stuff that we need to do to send that request, I'm going to write a separate function that can handle pretty much sending any type of request to Spotify. It'll just make it easier for us in the future. So I'm going to go into my util.py file. I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm just going to define a function, and I'm going to call this function execute Spotify API call. So execute, and then Spotify underscore API underscore call. Or we could say request if we wanted to be more specific. Now inside of here, I'm going to take the session ID. Now, really, this is going to be the host ID of the room so that we can get access to their token, and then we can, well, send the token as a part of the request. Then I'm going to say endpoint. So what I'm taking here is the session ID and then the endpoint. The endpoint is what endpoint of the Spotify API do I actually want to hit. Then I'm going to say post underscore is equal to false. You'll see why we have the underscore later. And then I'm going to say put underscore is equal to false. Now, the reason for this is that we could potentially be sending a post request, a put request, or a get request. So we need to kind of handle the different types of requests. And we just do this with a Boolean variable. So the first thing I'm going to do inside of here is say tokens is equal to get underscore user underscore tokens, and then we'll get them from the session ID. So assuming we send in the host here, we'll get the host token, and well, that's what we want. Next, I'm going to say header is equal to, and then inside of here, I'm going to say content hyphen type, and this is going to be equal to the standard. So application, if we spell that correctly, /JSON. And then I need to pass my authorization token. So I'm going to say authorization, if I spelt that correctly, colon, and this is going to be equal to the tokens.access token. Now it's also actually going to be equal to something else. Sorry, we need to change this a little bit. We're going to say bearer, and then a space, and then plus tokens.access token. Now this is just something that you need to send before the actual access token. You can look at the Spotify documentation if you want to see exactly why. But just trust me here, this is how you send the correct authorization token to Spotify. So you do the content type, application /JSON, and then you say the authorization, this is a key here, is equal to bearer, and then plus tokens.access token. Make sure you have a space here. So we're just concatenating these two strings together. Now that we have that, what we can say is if post underscore, then what we'll do is we'll send a post request. Now I think I imported that function. Yeah, it looks like I did. So I'm going to say post like that. We're going to take the base URL, which I think I've defined already. So it's up here, https://api.spotify.com/v1/me. Okay, so that's our base URL. And then we're going to add that to the endpoint. So we're going to say base URL and then plus endpoint like that. Then we're going to say that the headers is equal to the header. I mean, really, we could call this headers if we wanted to. So we could say headers like that, but that's fine. And that is going to send our request or our post request to whatever endpoint we put in. Next, we'll say if put underscore. So if we're sending a put request, then rather than post, we're just going to say put. And then we'll say base underscore URL plus endpoint. And again, headers is equal to headers. And then finally, we will say response is equal to, and then a get request, because if you didn't say that you wanted to post and you didn't say that you wanted to put, we're going to assume that you want the get request. We're going to say base URL plus endpoint, and then we will have headers, but in between headers and the base URL plus endpoint, we're just going to have an empty dictionary. The reason for this is it's just syntax for the get request. We need to put something in here that we're like sending with the get request. Anyways, so we just put that there. This is the get request, and I think that I imported get. Yeah, I did. So post put get, so we're all good up there. Awesome. So now we have response there. The next thing I'm going to do is just say try response.json like that, or sorry, not try, return response.json, and then otherwise, so except return, and we're just going to return an error like that and say that could not send request, or could not, we'll say issue with request. Okay, so just to clarify what we're doing here, again, we have post underscore put underscore. The reason I added the underscores is because these would mirror the post function and the put function. So obviously I need to distinguish them from that. So that's why I put the underscore. Then here, what I'm doing at the end is I'm just sending a get request. Now, there's a potential to get some issues with the get request. When we send the get request, we're looking for information. We could possibly have an issue sending this get request. So if we try to return response.json and, well, this crashes and doesn't work because for some reason we can't get the JSON information, then instead we're just going to return an error. Now, there won't be any issue with the put or post because we don't care about the response from these requests. So that's why I'm not doing the try and catch for those ones, or the try and accept. Anyways, hopefully that is clear. So now that we have this, we can use this function to send a request to any Spotify endpoint. So we will continue in just 1 second, but I need to quickly thank the sponsor of this video and this series, which is Algo Expert. If you are preparing for your software engineering coding interviews, you need to be using Algo Expert. It is the best platform to use to learn data structures and algorithms and how to solve advanced interview problems. I happen to be an instructor on the platform and can guarantee you that there is many high quality questions there. Check out Algo Expert from the link in the description and use the code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. So let's go back to views.py, and inside of views.py, we're going to use this function to send a request to this endpoint. So we're going to say that our response is equal to, and this is going to be execute Spotify API call. And let me just import this first. So just to save us from typing all of these out, I'm going to say from .util import star. Now what importing star will do is just import everything from the file so we can use anything that we've defined inside of there. So that's perfect. So we're going to say execute underscore Spotify API request. And then inside of here, we're going to pass the host because that's the ID or the session ID of the host is what host is. And then we'll pass the endpoint. And there we go. For this specific request, it's going to be a GET request. So we don't need to set, true or false for put and post, as you can see here. Okay, so now that we have the response, what we want to do is have a look at this response and just see what is actually in it. So before I start doing anything too fancy, let's just print out response like that. And then just make sure we don't have an error. Let's return a response inside of here. This will just be an empty response. And we will just say that the status is equal to status.http underscore 200 underscore OK. And in fact, maybe we can just return the response. I don't know if this is going to give us an issue or not, but we'll just return the response and see what happens now. Okay, so let's go back to our server. That's all working. Okay, I'm going to go to my web browser. Oops, that's not what I meant to open. And I'm just going to actually type in this view. And that reminds me that we haven't set up the URL for current song. So let's do that now. Let's go to urls.py. Let's import current song. And this actually would be a good opportunity to change this to just be an asterisk as well, because we just pretty well want everything from inside of there. So we're going to say path. And then this, I guess, will just be current hyphen song. That makes sense to me. And then we'll say current song dot as underscore view like that. See if we're getting yelled at. No, it looks good. And now let's go to our browser. So I'm going to go to /Spotify/ and I guess this is going to be current hyphen song. And when we do that, we get an index error. Okay, so interesting. We get a list index out of range, which I guess means, okay, so this would make sense. So the reason we got an index out of range error there was because we are not currently in a room. And if we go back and have a look at our views.py, we are filtering and looking for the room code, and we're trying to index 0, but if there is nothing that exists there, then, well, that's a problem. So we should probably fix this to make sure we don't run into this error. So I'm going to just write something down here. I'm going to say if room.exists, then we will say room is equal to room at index 0. Otherwise, we're just going to return a response that just says like 404 not found or something like that. So we'll return a response. This can just be empty. And then here we'll say the status is equal to status.http underscore 404 not found. Great. So that should fix that problem for us. But anyways, to test if this is actually working, let's create a room. And what's going on here? Come on. Create room. There we go. Okay, create a room. And you can see it brings me to Spotify. I'm going to blur out my email so you guys don't see it. And I'm just going to log in and then I'll be right back. Okay, so to test this out now and see if it's actually working, let's go and create a room. I'm going to press create room, brings us into a room. And now what I can do is send this request. So I'll send /Spotify, if we spell Spotify correctly, /current hyphen song. And there we go. We get status 404 service not found. Okay, interesting. Let me take a quick look and see what the issue is there, and I will be right back. So just a silly error on my part here. We're going to go into the current song view and just remove this the first slash. I had one right there. That's not going to work because if we look at our base URL inside of here, we have a trailing slash. So that was going to give us 2 slashes when we combine these 2 strings. So obviously that's no good. That's why we're getting service not found, because it couldn't find the URL we were sending the request to. So let's go back here. Let's run this. And now you can see that we're actually getting something for this response, right? We're actually getting the current song that is playing. So I do have Spotify open in the background here. I'll kind of drag it onto the screen quickly. And you can see that I am actually running a song. But inside of here, let's just see what we actually get. So we get a timestamp, we have a context, we have a progress in milliseconds, we have an item. This represents the current song. It tells us information about the album. There's information about the artist. You can see this is by Chris Ria, or however you say that. Available markets shows you all the available markets for this song. Lots of things like images, so you can get like the album cover. It has the ID of the song, the name of the song, so Dancing with Strangers, there you go. I don't know why that's on. Total tracks in the album, 28. And then more information about the artist and just other information as well. So you guys can see there's a lot of information here about the currently playing song. We also have is playing. This is equal to false because the song is currently paused. If this was true, obviously the song would be playing. You have duration of the song. Anyways, lots of stuff. So I'm going to show you how we can kind of parse through this because we don't want to return all of this information to the front end. We only want to return the information the front end actually wants just to make the request as small as possible. Now, in theory, we could return all of this, but we don't need to. So we'll just return the stuff that we want, and we'll kind of clean that up in our view function. So let's go to views.py here. Let's go back to current song. And now that we understand what's being returned to us from the Spotify API, we can actually start kind of parsing through it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just make sure that here we don't actually have an error, right? So I'm going to say if error is in, I guess this is just going to be response or item not in response. And item is a key that we're looking for because that has the information about the current song. Then what we're going to do is just return a response. This response will just be empty, and we'll say the status is equal to status.http underscore. This is, sorry, not 200. This should be 204 no content. So this will happen. We will not have an item tag in our response in a situation where there is no currently playing song, right? If there's no song playing whatsoever, we're not going to get any information back. So in that case, we'll just return to the front end, nothing, right? We'll just say, hey, sorry, we don't have any song information. That's it, you know, you have to deal with it. Anyways, so that's what we'll handle there. Now, after that, so if this is not the case, that means we actually do have a currently playing song. We'll get the information about the song, like the title and all of that. So we'll say item is, oops, not in all capitals, item is equal to response.get, and we're going to get the item. And then we're going to say that the duration is equal to, and this should be item now dot get because item itself stores a dictionary. So we're going to reference from item the duration underscore milliseconds. Then the progress, so this is like the current timestamp of the song, like how far in we are, is going to be equal to response dot get, and this is going to be progress underscore milliseconds. Then we will say that the album underscore cover, or yeah, album cover, I guess that's what you call it, is equal to item dot get. We're going to get the album like that, and then we are going to get from the album a key called images, and then from images we're going to reference the first image, and then we're going to get the key that is URL. Now I know I'm doing a lot here, and it's kind of like, how are you coming up with this stuff? The way I'm doing this is I've just looked at this response, right? And if you see, we have item, and then if I'm looking for, let's say, the album cover, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm referencing the album, which is right here. So I get that from item. Then inside of album, there is a tag called images. So images is right here. You can see this is a list. And this has 3 images, one that's 640 by 640, 300 by 300, and 64 by 64. I want the largest one. So I'm getting this one. So the first image, and then I'm getting the URL tag. That's how you can get the information that you want. You just kind of have to read through the JSON here and see how you would actually access it. Anyways, moving on. Next thing that I'm going to do is say is underscore playing is equal to response. Oops, like that. Dot get, and then is underscore playing is what we want. And then finally, song underscore ID is equal to not response, but item dot get ID. Awesome. So there we go. That's the information that we want. Now you'll notice though, or you probably won't notice because I have to come up with an example for that, which is kind of hard to do. But if you have multiple artists, the artist tag is going to have multiple keys inside of it. So the next few lines I'm about to write are just to handle the fact that if you have multiple artists for a song, it has like a really weird format. So we're just going to clean that format up when we send it to the front end. So anyways, just keep that in mind as we write this. So artist underscore string is going to be equal to an empty string. We're just going to kind of create our own string that represents the artist. So they're like separated by commas and all nice. And anyways, we're going to say if, sorry, not if, we're going to say for I, comma, artist in enumerate. And then we're going to say item dot get, and we're going to get the artist like that of the song. We'll say if I is greater than 0, so if it's not the first artist in the list, then what we want to do is say the artist string plus equals a comma, and we'll do a space after the comma as well. Then we're going to say name, representing for the name of the artist, is going to be equal to artist.get. We're going to get their name. And then we are simply going to say artist string plus equals, and we will append the name like that. So this is pretty straightforward. I imagine you guys understand what's going on here. But again, we're just creating a string that has all of the artist names separated by commas. Awesome. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to say song is equal to. And inside of here, we're going to create our own object that has all of the information we want to send back to the front end. So we're going to say item.get. Inside of here, we're going to put the name for the title of the song. Then we're going to say artist is equal to the artist string that we just created. Okay. And then we'll say the duration is equal to the duration. We'll say the progress is equal to, or actually, I'm not going to call it progress. I'm going to call it time. That makes more sense to me. Is going to be equal to progress. Then I'm going to say that the image underscore URL is equal to the album cover, because that is actually just going to be a link to an image, which is really convenient for us to show that image on the screen. Then we'll say is underscore playing. Well, that's equal to is underscore playing. And finally, we will add something for the number of votes that this song has to skip. But this is something that we're going to do later on. And actually, one more thing. So we'll just leave votes at 0 for now, just so we have it in the request already. Last thing we'll do here is we'll put the ID equal to the song underscore ID. Now, why am I getting yelled at here? Let's see what's going on. Okay, no, I think everything is good. I don't know what was happening there. So this should be about it for the current song. So now, instead of just returning the response, we're going to return the song, which is kind of our custom object that has all of the information about the song that we actually want to send to the front end. Because as a reminder, our application is calling this endpoint, and this endpoint in turn calls the Spotify endpoint, which then gives us information. We parse through it and then send back the necessary information. So anyways, now that we have this, we want to actually show this information on the screen, right? We want to see this in the room. So I'm going to make actually some pretty major modifications to the room page, and we're going to be making another component shortly as well. But the first thing that I want to do is go into the room page, and I just want to remove a lot of this stuff relating to like the votes, guest can pause, host, like all this. We don't need all this stuff. So I'm going to get rid of host, guest can pause, and votes. I don't think that's necessary to see, at least right now. So let's delete all of this because again, we don't need to see this information. We're just showing it previously kind of like for debugging the application. And now let's go to the state of our application here. And yes, this is where we want to be in the constructor. I'm going to add one piece of state here. I'm going to call this song. Now, by default, song is just going to be equal actually to an empty dictionary. And what we're going to do is we're going to store all of the information relating to the current song in the state of this component. So that way, if the song ever changes, we'll update the state, and then that will in turn update the component. So let's now write a method inside of here that can actually use the endpoint that we just created and get information about the current song. So let's write a method in here. I'm going to call this get current song. And inside of here, all we're going to do is call the fetch request. We're going to say fetch /Spotify / and then I guess this is just going to be current -song. I think that's what we called it. We'll then add our dot then. We will have response as the parameter. And what we're going to do to start is we're actually going to check if this response is not okay. So if not response.okay, then what we're going to do is we're simply going to return blank squigglies like this. So just a blank object. Otherwise, we're going to return the response.json. Now, the reason for this is just in the situation where for some reason this response errors out or it doesn't work, we'll just return empty, pretty much saying, hey, we don't have any song data, whereas otherwise we'll actually return all of the JSON data related to the song that's playing. Then we'll say dot then and then data. And inside of here, we're just going to say this dot set state. And we're simply going to set the state of song to be equal to the data like that. So the data that we get will simply just be all of the stuff that we want to put inside of the state. So all that information, and well, that is all we need. So now that we have that, we want to call get current song, and then we'll display some of this information. So I'm just going to go in my render here, and I'm just going to actually just put this.state.song. So this.state.song, just so we can have a look at it. I'm hoping this will just print out and not give me some weird error. And then ideally we can just look at what the current song is playing in our web browser. All right, so we need to call that though. So when does it make sense to call get current song? Well, it makes sense to call that after we have authenticated. So in theory, we could place that under here or somewhere in here, but it doesn't really make sense to me to do that there. So let's actually just place this under this.get room details. So we'll say this dot and then get current song, and just hope that the timing is okay. We're going to do this a different way later on. This is just kind of for testing purposes and for me to show you how this works. But anyways, let's test this out. So I'm going to go here. I'm just going to refresh. Okay, it looks like it's returning nothing right now. I guess I don't have any currently playing song. Okay. Okay, so I just ran this request again. I was just testing Spotify/current song, and I got an error. Basically, the fix to the error is that I had artist rather than artists. So if you look at line 83, this should have a plural S on it. So let's just add that there to make sure that we fix that, that endpoint. And now let me quickly run this. And there we go. So now we can see we're getting title, artist, duration, time, image URL, all of that. But that's not really what I want to test. I don't just want to test this endpoint. I want to test the actual application. So let's go into a room. We can see that we're in a room. Doesn't look like it updated our front end. So let me just do a hard reset here, and it looks like we're getting an error. And what is the error here? Minified React error. Oh, that's great. That just means it's not actually going to tell me what's wrong. So I'm just going to have to dig for a second. I'll be right back after I fix this problem. So I've made another silly mistake that was causing me errors here. I got to go to line 75 and simply return response.json. I'm sure you guys probably caught that. But inside of my get current song method, I just made an issue or an error and just forgot to return response.json. So I was returning this blank one, but then I just had response.json like that. Instead, we need to return, and that should hopefully fix the error that we were having. I've also added a console.log statement here to get current song, just so hopefully we can see something popping up. So let's refresh here, and there we go. So we can see in my console, I'm getting the title, I'm getting the duration, I'm getting all the information that I wanted about the current song. Okay, so that's great, but the issue here now is that this endpoint is only being hit whenever we refresh the page. Now, that's kind of an issue because that means we don't know if the song is fast forwarded, we don't know if someone paused the song, because remember, anyone on the Spotify account can be modifying what's happening to this song. So what we really need to do here is we need to what's known as pull this endpoint. So we are constantly checking whether or not, a song is playing, if it's paused, what song is playing. We're just constantly checking for updates. That's what we need to do. Now, some of you, if you're more advanced, may have heard of something called WebSockets. Now, with WebSockets, we wouldn't need to do this because what we could do is we could set up a WebSocket, and the WebSocket could hit an endpoint on our server every single time the song is updated. Unfortunately, Spotify does not have support for WebSockets, at least not for the public, so we're stuck with having to do this polling method. Now, just so you are aware, what we're going to do is every single second, we're going to send the request to get this information. We're just going to continually update it every single second so we always know what's happening on Spotify, and we're only at most a second behind. Now, that is going to result in a lot of requests, right? We're going to be sending a lot of requests, and if multiple people on our website, that's going to be multiple people sending all of these requests every second. So this is not an optimal solution. For the amount of people on our website, this will be totally fine, and even up to like 40 or 50,000 users, this will be fine. But as soon as you start getting into really large websites, doing something like polling just really doesn't make sense, and it's not a very efficient way of doing things. Regardless, I'm going to show you how we do it here. And I just want you to be aware that this method is called polling. You can kind of look it up and see how exactly it works and why it's not usually the preferred method. But we're kind of stuck with this because Spotify did not implement WebSockets. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to set up an interval on this room page. So every 1 second, we pull this endpoint and update the state with the current song information. To do this, we're going to use some lifecycle methods. So component did mount. This is once the component has loaded, I believe. I believe this is loaded on the screen. Then what we're going to do is set a variable. We're going to say this.interval is equal to this function. It's called setInterval. This is just built into JavaScript, I believe, or React. So you don't need to import it or anything like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the function inside of here that we want to be called at every interval. So I'm going to say this dot get current room. Now get current, what am I saying? Get current room. Get current song, sorry, my bad. Get current song is the function we've defined here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the delay at which I want to call this. So every 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So again, all this is doing is it's going to call this function every second, and I'm starting this interval as soon as the component mounts. Now, since I have this interval, I need to make sure I close or stop this interval when the component unmounts. So I'm going to say component did unmount, or I guess, sorry, we're doing component will unmount, my bad. And inside of here, we're going to say clear interval, and we're going to clear this dot interval. All this is going to do is just stop this interval from running. Now, component will unmount pretty much tells us this component is going to be gone. It's about to be destroyed. What do we have to do before it's destroyed? Kind of like clean up operations is what we're doing inside of here. So anyways, with this interval set now, if I actually go ahead and refresh my web page, you'll see that if we have a look in my, well, apparently this is causing an error, but if we have a look here, we are constantly hitting this endpoint and we're printing something out. I don't know where I have that printed, but every second we are sending a request to the server. So this interval is indeed working, but there is some error here. It says uncaught in promise, type error, this dot set state is not a function. So to fix this, what we do need to do is actually bind the get current song method to the this keyword. So we're going to say this dot get current song is equal to this dot get current song dot bind to the this keyword. And then we can actually go ahead and remove this call to get current song in the constructor because we're going to automatically do that based on this interval that we've set. So now if I go here and I refresh, we can see that all is indeed working. We're printing out the song information every single time. And now all that's left to do is actually display this in kind of a nice format on the actual web page. So let's start doing that. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to make another component, a brand new component. We're going to call this a media player or a music player. And what this component will do is it will actually display the information about the song. So we'll have kind of a nice little player that has, you know, like a play button and then a skip button, and it'll show the album cover and it will have the title of the artist or the title of the song, sorry, as well as the artist of the song. And anyways, that's what we're going to do now. So to do that, let's make a new component. So let's go into components, new file. Let's call this musicplayer.js. All right, so at the top of our file, let's start by importing React. So we're going to say import React, and then inside of here, we're going to say component, and this is going to be from simply React. Next, we're going to import a bunch of other things we're going to use for styling. You're probably familiar with most of these at this point. We're going to import grid. We're going to import typography. We're going to import the card. We're going to import the button. Sorry, not the button, the icon button. And then I'm trying to look here. I think that's all we need from at material-ui/core. But we are going to import some icons, so like the play icon and the pause icon, stuff like that. So we're going to say import. And then from here, we're going to import the play arrow icon. This is going to be from at material UI / not core this time. It's actually going to be /icons like that. Then we also want not just the play arrow icon, but we want the skip next icon. We also want the pause icon. And finally, we're going to import one more thing from Material UI core. I forgot this one. This is called linear progress. We're going to use linear progress just as a way to show the current status of the song, or like, I guess, how much time is gone from the song. I don't really know a good way to describe this, but hopefully you get the idea. You know, when you look at a song, it tells you like how much time has already played in it. That's what we'll use linear progress to do. Anyways, let's make our class. We're going to say export default class. We're going to call this music player, and this is going to extend the component. Then we're going to start by creating our constructor. Inside of the constructor, we're going to take props. We're going to start by calling super on the props. We always have to do this when we make a new class or new React component. Then we're going to say this dot state is equal to, and we want two things. We want playing. This is going to be equal to false. And actually, sorry, I don't think we even need the state. In fact, we don't need the state. I'm just looking at some old code here. So let's remove the state. Okay, now let's just write the render function, and this will be all we have for this video. So what we're going to do now is just spend a few minutes kind of styling this component. Again, what I want this component to look like is just like a general media player, right? I want it to have the current status of the song. I want it to have a play button, a fast forward button. I want it to have the album cover, the name of the song, the artist of the song, and that's pretty much it. So let's start by creating a card. If you haven't seen a card, well, I guess you'll just kind of see what it looks like when we actually render this on the screen, but they're pretty popular in most like component libraries. They're just kind of like a nice, like styled little box with rounded corners. They kind of pop off the screen a bit. And well, yeah, you'll see how it looks when we render the page. Anyways, we're going to make a card. Inside of the card, we're going to make a grid. We've used this many times, so I'll go through it quickly, but grid container, we're going to say align items, and this is going to be equal to center. This should align all the items vertically in the grid. Then we're going to close the grid. We're going to create a few grid items. So we'll start by saying grid item align equals center. We're going to say XS equals 4. Now you'll see why we're doing XS equals 4 in a second, but this is going to be for our album cover because we want this to be on the furthest left, and then we want everything else to be to the right of the album cover, as you would kind of expect it to be. So grid item align center XS 4. Let's just copy this one more time because we will have another grid item. So inside of here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to render the image, which is the album cover. So to do this, I'm going to say IMG standing for image. I'm going to say SRC standing for source. And since we actually know the image source, we can put it directly here. So just before I get too far ahead of myself, what I'm going to do is I am going to pass all of the information relating to a song to this component here, to the music player, and then it will have access to it here, right? So I'm going to assume that I have things like the title, the artist, all of the stuff that gets returned from our API call, we will have access to in this music player through the props, because we're going to pass it in as a prop to this component. So what I can say, if that's the case, is this.props dot, and then I'm going to say image underscore URL, because this is the URL of the album cover image that we want to display. Then I'm just going to say height is equal to 100%, and I'm going to say that width is equal to 100%. This is just to make sure it fills the entire container. That's what we're doing that for. Awesome. So now we have that. Let me just quickly save. I'm wondering why I'm getting this error here with grid and with card. I see. It's because I forgot to return. So let's actually return all of this stuff in parentheses, and that should hopefully fix it. And it seems like that was not the fix. I believe, okay, that's what it is. I didn't end my image tag. Anyways, now we have our image tag. This will show the album cover. Now, after we show the album cover, I want to show pretty much everything else that will be in this other grid item. Now I'm going to say XS equals 8 for this grid item. And I think I've gone through this before with how XS works for grid, but pretty much this is going to take up 1/3 of the width of the grid. This is going to take up 2/3 of the width of the grid, which kind of makes sense if you think about the text relative to the size of the album cover. Anyways, that's kind of why I have 4 and 8 there. You can mess with the numbers and see how it changes. But the first thing that I'm going to do is have the title of the song. So I'm going to say typography, and then I'm going to say component is equal to, this is going to be an H5, nice and large. We're going to say, or sorry, H5, I guess would be smaller than something like H4. Then we'll say that the variant is going to be equal to H5. And inside of typography, all we're going to do is say this.props.title. Awesome. So next, what I'm going to do is just copy this typography tag because we're going to have the artist showing up next. So we'll start by changing this.props.title to be artist. We're then going to change the component. Actually, sorry, we're not going to use a component for this one. We're going to say color is equal to, and this is going to be text secondary. This is just going to make it kind of like a nice gray color that works well for the artist. You'll see that in a second. And the variant is actually going to be subtitle 1. Now there is multiple subtitles. Again, you can look at those on your own, but this will just make it kind of a little dimmer, a little smaller, like light underneath this, this text here, which is the title of the song. All right, so now that we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a div inside of this grid item. The reason I'm doing this is just to make sure that all of my icons are in kind of the same upper level container. I don't want them to be In this, I don't want their parent directly to be the grid. I want it to be a div. Anyways, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a icon button. So when you make an icon button, what you have to do is you have to actually put an icon inside of this tag. And then on the icon button itself, you can do things like create the onClick. So anyways, we'll see the onClick when we start, I guess messing with the onClick and actually having these buttons function. We're not going to do that in this tutorial, but I'm just going to write a little bit of JavaScript here because the first button that I want to show is either a play button or a pause button. So if the song is currently playing, then I want to show the pause button because you should be able to pause it. If the song is currently not playing, if it's paused, then I want to show the play button so you play it. So this is pretty straightforward, and we've done this many times already, but I'm going to say this.props.is_playing ? And this is just doing that one line if statement, or there's a fancy word for it that someone reminded me of, but I forget. And in this case, if it is playing, then what we are going to show is we're going to show the pause icon, which we imported from above. Otherwise, we are going to show the play arrow icon like that. Now, don't ask me why they don't just call it the play icon. Maybe there is a different one that is just play, but we're going to use play arrow icon. So now this will show us a different icon based on whether the song is playing or not. Now, after we have that icon button, we want one more icon button that's always going to be the same, and this is going to be the skip button. So inside of here, we will simply display the skip next icon like that. And let's just do a little slash like that. Awesome. So this should show our buttons. And then the last thing that we need, because that's actually all we need for right now, is the progress bar that will kind of act as like the song progress. So at the bottom, outside of our grid, but still inside of our card, I'm going to say linear progress. And this is going to be variant equal to determinant. This just means that we are determining the value of this linear progress bar. And we're going to say that the value is equal to, and then I'm going to place the value inside of here in 1 second. So now that we have this, let's just go to the top of the render function. I want to write a variable, and the variable, I'm going to call it song progress. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how these linear progress things work, this is specific to Material UI, but we pass a value out of 100. So what I need to do if I want to show an accurate depiction of how far along we are in the song is I need to take the current timestamp we are at in the song, the duration of the song, so I need to divide the two, and then I need to multiply it by 100 to pretty much figure out what percentage of the song we're currently through. And that way, I'm going to have a number for the value that is out of 100, so between 0 and 100, that kind of accurately represents the current duration of the song that's been played. So you'll see it when I do the math here, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to say this.props.time, and then that's going to be divided by this.props.duration. Remember, duration is the length of the song, and time is the current time into the song. And then I'm just going to multiply that number by 100, and that will give me what I'm looking for. So for value now, we'll just plug in this variable song progress. I could have also just put that in there, but I figured it'd be cleaner to do it this way. And now we should see that this progress bar actually moves as we continually get a new duration for the song, or a new time, sorry, I guess like a new progress time. Anyways, I've been talking a lot. Let's refresh here and let's see what we're getting. Well, I guess nothing is happening, first of all, because we have an issue here, which I'll have to look into, but also because we haven't actually rendered this component. So let's do that now. All right, so I just was looking at this error here. Essentially what happens sometimes is if you don't play a song on Spotify for like a really long time, then you just don't get any result essentially for this. It just gives you blank. So we're getting uncaught, syntax error, unexpected end of JSON input. It's actually fine. We don't really need to even handle this because in the situation where we don't have a song currently playing, we just won't show anything on the screen, or it'll like look blank, as you'll see in a second. Anyway, so don't worry about that, but let's render this component now. So let's go to the room.js page. Let's import this component first of all. And why is responsive font size in there? I don't want that there. Let's go and say import. This is going to be, I guess, music. Oops, if I can get my cap locks working here. Music player from, and then /music player like that. Now what we'll do is we will go here into our render method. And right where we had everything else before, so in between these two grid items, we'll simply just render that component. So we'll render the music player, and like that. And then what we'll pass to music player is all of the information relating to the song. So what I can do is actually use the spread operator. So I'll do 3 dots and then say this dot state dot song. This is what will pass through the props to the music player. And this means that we will take all of the information related to the song. So like the title, the artist, all of that, and we'll pass them in as separate keys or separate props to music player. So that's ideal. That's what we want. And then that will allow us inside of music player to do things like this.props.title, this.props.artist, so on, so forth. So let's do that now. Let's refresh and let's see what we get. And we're getting an error. Icon button is not defined. Okay, so I think it should be button icon or icon button. Okay, anyways, let's go to music player. So icon button, we don't have a capital B here for button. That would be why we're running into that issue. Let's refresh now and let's see if this fixes the problem. Okay, so still not fixing the problem, minified React error. I will be right back. All right, so I was having some issue with these icons right here. I just figured out what the problem is. Really stupid issue. I really don't like the way that they did this, but this import statement is just wrong, what we have up here. We need to import all of these individually actually, and you'll see why in a second. But we need to import the play arrow icon from and then at material UI / icons / and then actually play arrow. You don't even include the icon at the end, which is really strange to me. And then import, and we're going to import the pause icon from, you guessed it this time, the same thing, except we're not going to include the icon again. So material UI / icons / pause like that, which again is really strange. And then import next one, which is going to be skip next icon from at material UI / icons / skip next. Okay, so I'm hoping this is going to work now. Let's give a quick refresh of our application and let's see. And there we go. It does indeed work. So you can see we have this song, the blinding lights, and then there's the play button as well as the fast forward button. And if I actually go ahead and play this, you'll see again that the progress bar will start going. If I fast forward the song, we can see that the new song shows up. And with really long text, you might run into some errors here, but as I expand this, you can see all looks well and all is good. So anyways, that is it for this tutorial video. I hope you all enjoyed. In the next video, we'll go over how to get this pause and fast forward button to work. And then we'll do a few other things as well. So with that said, if you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in another YouTube video.